One of the greatest markers of growth is self-awareness. A self-aware business that is able to understand the changing needs of its clients and customers and leverage its domain knowledge to create higher impact solutions is a business that has set itself up for exponential growth. This edition of Broadcast1 presents Business Evangelists of India puts the spotlight on Hinduja Global Solutions, a leading player in the BPM industry committed to delivering higher impact solutions through technology-led innovation. Partha, thank you so much for joining us on Business Evangelists of India, and thank you for sharing your time. I want to start this conversation by asking you how the BPM industry is changing, both from the perspective of changing customer sensibilities and the provider perspective.
Firstly, pleasure being with you, and that's a great question. If you look at the evolution of this industry, and let's say we take the year Y2K 2000, being the watershed year for the industry, that's when most of the Indian BPM players really first evolved. The initial promise of this industry was to provide low-cost, high-quality labor to do the work. And over the last 2 decades, that perspective has changed significantly. And even then, most Indian players were typically only offshore players, which means they had a setup in India, they could hire lots of people in India, and they would provide that high-quality, low-cost service. Today, where you find most of the Indian firms have really gone global. We have footprints in many parts of the world. And also, the largest shift that has happened is it's no longer a labor arbitrage story anymore. It's really value arbitrage, which is we provide a lot of technology, we provide a lot of thought leadership in the way we service our clients. So if you look at just the customer perspective, they're not really coming to us saying that, okay, listen, I want to take X percentage off my cost line. They're coming to us and saying that what value can you add to my business? How can you transform my customer experience? So that's the big shift from being able to say that the only value that I bring to you is a lower cost of doing it, to saying that we really add value by bringing you thought leadership, best practices, domain knowledge, technology. It's a more well-rounded approach towards providing the service. So that's from the customer perspective. And from the provider perspective, obviously we've had to up our game to be able to provide that. Being able to hire a different kind of leadership, to be able to hire different kind of talent who can bring in domain knowledge, thought leadership, technology. You will be surprised. In AGS, we've got about 1,500 nurses.
Right.
And that's probably more than the nurses that you'll have in many large hospitals in the world, right? And we provide healthcare, advice to clients. We have MDs. We have PhDs doing analytics work. So that's how we've had to up our game to be able to provide thought leadership to our clients. So that's the 2 perspectives that I can talk about.
So let's say there's been an evolution in this ecosystem. How has that evolution impacted HES?
From being a firm which had just one office in Bangalore way back in 2000 when I started, we are now present in 7 countries. We are present in Philippines, we are present in Jamaica, we are present now onshore. Now that's again another big shift that has happened. Earlier, we used to be pure offshore players and therefore provide the cost arbitrage between high-cost onshore geographies, which our clients used to be in, and offshore locations, which used to be low cost. Now we are everywhere. And the way we've differentiated ourselves is what we call the white glove service gets provided onshore. And something that is more routine, if you don't need that white glove service, we move that work offshore. So our ability to provide a solution at every price point that the customer wants is the way that we've spread our wings. We've also been very careful in trying to be selective of the markets that we address.
Right.
We've tried to stick to our knittings of being able to servicing only the English-speaking countries. large economies and not spread ourselves very thin.
Right, so you said we spread our wings, and you also at the same time spoke about you have targeted only a few focused areas. So I want to speak to you more about the verticals and the geographies that HES focuses on.
Let me talk about verticals first. So healthcare is big for us. It's about 52% of our revenues and predominantly US healthcare. You may know that it's probably one of the largest spends in that economy. It's several trillions of dollars, right? And therefore it gives us the opportunity to tap into a very, very lucrative market. And we can add a lot of value. The boundaries are getting blurred. That are you just a person who's providing a backroom service to a person who's also the first port of call when a patient has a problem.
Correct.
We are getting into care management as well, which is more, it's no longer a BPM thing. I mean, at some point of time, I can actually provide you medical advice.
Right.
So that's the cutting edge of healthcare, I would say. But we are also big in telecom and technology. We are big in consumer electronics and consumer durables, retail, e-commerce. So I would say about 5-6 verticals are verticals that we are focusing on. Insofar as the footprint is concerned, we are in 7 countries. The largest operation is in India, followed by Philippines. We've got a small presence in Jamaica, about 3,000 people. And then we are fairly well represented onshore in US. We've got about 5-6 centers in different parts of the US. We've got about 10 sites in Canada. We've got 4 sites in UK. So that's the geographical spread. And I forgot to mention about one small office that we have in the Middle East, because we're trying to also see whether that market makes sense.
Right.
So 7 countries, 34,000 people.
So coming on to being the thought leaders in creating transformative solutions, especially in a technology-driven era, how is it that HES looks at innovation?
So we've created what is called as an innovation network. We believe anybody can innovate. So we've got a program that we call All Ideas Matter. It's called AIM. Okay, that captures innovative ideas that is arriving from the shop floor. It's evaluated as to whether it truly makes sense, whether it's scalable, and whether it adds value. It's either makes things more efficient, reduces cost of operations, or completely transforms the experience. So based on which category it falls into, after the evaluation process goes through, then we try to replicate it across the geographies. And we have a process of rewarding such ideas, saying that, okay, if you are the originator of this idea, then you get rewarded for replicating this idea. So that's the All Idea Matters and the innovation network that I'm talking about. We're also understanding that innovation is not necessarily having to do things in-house. In the geographies that we operate in, there is a fairly rich, I would say, ecosystem of extremely innovative companies, you may call them startups, of great ideas and great products. So we have a way of trying to be constantly in touch with them, evaluating their ideas and finding out ways of going to market together. So the idea may not be mine. It's a startup's idea, which is a really cool idea, but look at how it creates a symbiotic relationship. He has an idea, I have the capital, and I have the marketplace, and I have the client. He doesn't have capital, he doesn't have the marketplace, he doesn't have the customer, he just has an idea.
Right.
So we come together and create a symbiotic relationship where I can take his product or his idea, white label it, and say that, okay, powered by HGS, at the back end it's his idea that it is working, but we take it out there. So, you know, it's been very interesting, this journey, and it's something that we've been trying to do in the last 2-3 years. Reasonable success. There are some really cool ideas out there that we are able to tap into the startup ecosystem out here in India, take it to the market, scale those ideas, and get good returns out of it. We've also tried to buy into innovations. We've invested in some companies which have these innovations.
Okay.
Not all of them have been uniformly successful, so you have to be used to a fact that 2 out of the 10 ideas that we invested in will actually make it,
Right.
and the others may fail. There, the idea is to be able to fail fast.
Right.
Okay, otherwise you'll blow up a lot of money. So that's the other part of innovation. One is small innovation on the floor, making sure that you have a system in place to recognize, evaluate, and then scale those ideas, and not necessarily always making those ideas. You buy some ideas as well. So that's how we're trying to make innovation work for us.
So Partha, we've spoken about how you take innovation to the marketplace. Let's talk a little bit about the other side of innovation and how you implement innovation within the workforce or within the employee culture at HGS.
That's a great question, and that's really the biggest agenda that HGS and I have going forward. As I talked about the transformation of this industry from being a provider of high quality but low cost resources to somebody who brings in domain knowledge, thought leadership, and all of that, clearly that needs a different kind of a workforce. So there are two approaches that we have taken. The first approach has been to hire a different profile of people. People with higher levels of degrees, let's say MBAs. We brought in people with data sciences background. A lot of the value that's getting added is through our analytics practice. And you need people with a data sciences background and all of that to be able to do the background work that adds insight into the customer's processes. Number two is also we got people inside the system, and how do you upskill them? And that upskilling is happening through continuous learning programs that we are starting right now. One of the things that we've tied up with many vendors is e-learning modules, which is our self-paced modules, which based upon your interest and the relevance to the industry, you can sign up for those courses and then educate yourself. We've also signed up with service providers who can give you instructor-led, a kind of combination of e-learning, self-learning, and instructor-led courses. Yeah. So we've signed up with those as well. So that's how we're trying to up the skill level inside the company to make it commensurate with what we are trying to promise to the market.
That leads me to my next question. I want to speak to you now about the work culture. What drives the work culture and business practices at HGS?
So let me weave that answer into the innovation thing that I talked about, right? A big thing about innovation is the corporate support available to experiment. And what happens to experiments that succeed? And more importantly, what happens to experiments that don't succeed? How do you treat the stigma of failure? While you glorify people and you reward and recognize people who've been fabulously successful, if you do just the opposite, that you punish people who failed, then you don't create a culture which encourages innovation, which encourages experimentation. So one of the things that we have tried to do is to make people believe that it is okay to try and fail, and failure is not a stigma, right? So there have been initiatives that we have taken. We've failed miserably in that. We've personally taken care that those employees are not impacted by that and they can move on to the next project, and then there isn't any stigma attached to the failure. But it can be costly if you don't do it right. So the experiments has to be in a way that you fail fast. And you don't go on spending money, funding a failure and all of that, because that can consume a lot of capital. So once you realize that this idea is not going to be working, cut your losses, get out of it, start something new, right? So that's a culture that we have tried to build. It's new for the organization. I have to say that it's new for the organization, and I cannot say that we perfected it.
Right.
Tied with that is also a feeling of, I would call it entrepreneurship, which is think of it as if this is your company, think of it as if this is your money, right, and therefore spend the money wisely, but take pride and accountability and ownership of the success of the projects that you're working in because you are attached to it. So we've tried to build that as well.
Given that there are still certain things that you're working towards perfecting, let's talk about where you view HGS a few years from now, say about 5 years from now.
I think we are trying to evolve to a point where I can say that we are a technology-led services company. 5 years from now, I think we'll call ourselves a technology company, because the services that comes behind that, we're going to take that to be our USP. There's a big differentiation that I'm trying to make between an IT company and us. We will never be an IT company. I'll never be able to get into that space. But what I'm trying to bring out is be called CX through DX. CX is customer experience transformation, right, and DX is digital technologies. And by bringing technology in, we want to be able to transform the customer experience for our clients, because that's our sweet spot. That's a domain that we have spent the last 2 decades in. That's where we are headed.
It's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you, and I'm
Thank
taking
you.
back your insights on how to treat failure. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
To become a leading-edge thought leader, a business must recognize its ability to create and deliver high-impact solutions. That's the power of thought that HES is leveraging. We're building a movement of positive awareness. Come join us on B1 TV and become an architect of positive impact on the world. We'll see you there.